a couple housekeeping things. Like Ann said, if you have questions, I'll be monitoring that the entire hour. So put them in there. We'll shoot to get to them at the end. If there's a bunch, we'll kind of stop in the middle and ask any direct questions. You can ask questions directly to our panelists in the Q&A, and then I'll just read those off to them and get those answered. We have Alison, Bob, and Mary. I'm going to let them kind of do a quick 30-second introduction, tell us about themselves, and go from there. So, Bob, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Bob Wilkerson. I'm the branch manager in Maple Grove for Refined Lending. I highly focus on new construction. I think that's why I got the invite here. I've been doing mortgages for about 10 years and just excited to be here and answer any questions that I can.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. Mary? Mary, you're muted still.
There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Dale, and I'm with Lennar Homes. I'm a new home consultant. I've been in the new construction business for 20 years, and I've been with Lennar for 5 years. And I absolutely love new construction and excited to be here and answer your questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. Alison?
Hey, everyone. My name is Alison Schmidt. I am a licensed realtor. I have been since 2016. I've been with Loomis Homes for 4 years already, working in the new construction field in the West and North and Southwest Metro.
Awesome. Thank you. Real quick before we get into it, and I pass it off to Jill to moderate here, but super cool. Allison's a little bit more local here. We have Mary with Lennar National, and then we have Bob who does everything new construction on the financing side. So a lot of the questions today are going to be sort of associated with just how to be a better agent and representation with your client when going into new construction. We'll field some financing questions and everything along those lines when it comes to new construction. So Jill can take it away.
Right. Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I think that as Max was touching on and as everybody knows, new construction is a huge topic right now because there are basically no listings or homes for sale or available homes to sell. So sometimes you just got to, make your own way, right? So enter new construction and we'll get some new stuff on here. As we're diving into everything, obviously we've got two representing a builder. We've got the lender on staff too. So there's going to be some questions that are obviously just going to pertain more to the builders. And then I've got some special questions for Bob to kind of tie everything in together. So as Max had said, please enter your questions in the Q&A. I'm here to get anything you guys want answered. Otherwise, I've got a whole list of stuff to interrogate them with. So on that note, let's get started with the two builders. So Bob, grab a cup of coffee, hang out, do your thing. I'm going to take the first 5 to 10 minutes with them here. So we'll just start out right out the gate, kind of rapid fire, just to get to know the two builders we have, right? So we'll start with, does your company include the lot cost into the pricing? Mary, we'll start with you.
The home site is included as part of the price. And then there is a home site premium based on where the home is located in the community. So for example, a wooded home site would have a higher home site premium than a home that backs up to another home, for example.
Sure, makes sense. How about you, Allison? Do you guys include the lot cost in your pricing?
Yes, we do. So any listing that's advertised with a particular model is priced out for that lot in specific as well. So kind of to the same note, as Mary said, there are lot premiums that can be different from lot to lot, and they do vary by location, but it is always included in that listed price.
Super good to know. Do you guys include landscaping? Mary, we'll start with you again. Do you guys include landscaping in your pricing?
Sure. We include a partial front landscaping on each side of the home, and sod is included and irrigation is included. But it is important to check with each community because it can be a little bit different per community as far as what the city requires.
Makes sense. How about you, Allison?
Yep, same and similar answer. There's always some landscaping that's included, but it varies by city. Typically sod for the front and side yards at the minimum.
Perfect.
So that's that. Just to add on there, quick, Jill. With I think it's important to touch on. You guys mentioned that it changes with the city, right? So you're seeing more so. Have you ever dealt with a city that doesn't require any landscaping, or is there something that they always require that's pretty basic across the board for all cities?
I would say it really, really varies by city. Some cities require it, some cities don't. Just like Allison referred to, some cities will only require sod in the front, and then the homeowner can do the sod in the back. So it really is per city.
Is that something that the buyer would have the opportunity to do at the same time? If you guys are only required to do the front for the city, could the buyer say, hey, I'll cover the rest, but can we do it all at the same time?
Yeah, we will work with a customer as far as if they want to do additional landscaping. It all comes down to good communication. So they just need to let us know that. Then the construction manager will work with them to decide as far as where they want to put that landscaping. What I've observed is a customer will go over to Home Depot, purchase some like orange paint, and then they'll just put a nice orange line as far as where they're going to put their landscaping. So we won't put sod there, but we'll put it on the rest of the home site. And that has worked very well.
That's a good tip. So go to Home Depot, get some bright orange paint,
Yep.
mark where you want so that you don't have to cut the sod out that you already paid for.
Yep. And that has worked really, really well.
Very smart. Everybody write that down. That's a good tidbit. Allison, what about for you guys? Do you have anything to add to that?
No, pretty much the same. We give our customers the contact information for the sod company. So if they want to tack on, if it's not already included, they are welcome to do that.
Perfect. Good to know. What about warranties? Allison, we'll start with you this time. What do you guys offer as far as warranties moving like after closing?
Yep. So we follow the Minnesota Standard Residential Home Builders Warranty. So your home is guaranteed to be free from defects for 1 full year, anything workmanship related that fits within the standard to corrections. 2 years covers all your mechanicals. And I always kind of add in there that there are certain mechanicals that will have a much longer warranty that default to the manufacturer after those first 2 years. And then it's a 10-year structural warranty.
Okay. So structurally, if the whole thing just crumbles, you guys are going to rebuild within 10 years?
Yes.
Perfect. Good to know. What about for you guys, Mary?
Ours is the same. Allison did a great job explaining it. Ours is the same.
Perfect. Well, that keeps it easy.
So in that first year, Mary and Allison, if my buyers call me and they say, it's 2 months after they moved in and they walk into their vaulted living room and there's a big crack down the center, that's patched and covered. Correct?
I'll let Allison go first.
I would consider that part of the workmanship warranty. Now, it depends on how big that crack is and whether it was just from minor settling and drying out of the drywall. We do an 11-month walkthrough with all buyers to make sure that the first year warranty items have been addressed prior to its expiration.
Oh, that's really awesome. What about you guys, Mary? What about with the crack in the?
Yep. We also do a 11-month walkthrough as far as to cover any nail pops. That would be like a settling crack. That's very, very common. But we do the customer gets an 11-month certificate that they can turn in, and we'd be happy to come out and do those, take care of any nail pops or settling cracks like that.
That might be a good for all the realtors on here. That's a great touch point and a reason to do it. So if they're going to be going out there anyway, maybe remind your buyer who you worked with 11 months ago, set that reminder for you guys to give them a call and remind them to do this before that 1-year warranty's up. That's an easy touch point that you don't really have to think too much about or have a reason beyond to call. I'm just going to give myself credit for that one. Jot that down.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. And we try to remind customers as they're going through the building process this acetylene crack and nail pop is very, very common, because if you think of the weather in Minnesota, how it changes, and like this year, it's really, really cold. So that is very, very typical.
Very good point. Very good point. All right. So as far as, let's say they're moving from an existing construction into new construction, they're bringing their appliances with them. Is that something that they could get a credit then? Or how do you guys handle if they're bringing their own materials or their own appliances? Allison, we'll start with you.
So I usually ask the question first, what style of loan are you doing? Because if we're looking at a lender who will not allow closing without appliances in the home, then the chances for doing that are pretty slim. Most builders don't allow buyers to move their personal property on site prior to closing or have that installed. So if we can close without appliances, then yes, that's a possibility. But otherwise, it's like stick with the standard package and you can figure out what to do with them after you move in.
That's a good point. What about for you guys, Mary?
Ours is identical. Yeah. Ours is identical to what Allison just shared.
Perfect. Bob, this is, I feel like, a great tee-in for you to be able to join this before your full coffee break is up.
Right.
You guys, how do you guys handle that? Can they move their appliances in? Can they close without the appliances on there? What would you recommend?
So it really depends on what type of financing we're doing. So if it's a construction loan, we're likely not going to care. If it's just an end loan, it's going to default to the investor's guidelines. So from our perspective, conventional loan, it really shouldn't be a problem. FHA loan, you need to have the appliances in the property.
Okay. So that's
Also depends on what's included in the contract. So if appliances are part of your purchase contract, when we send out for a final inspection, we're going to be looking for appliances in the property.
That makes sense. That makes sense. That's also a good point for, as the buyer's agent, to remind the clients that appliances are personal property. So in that regard, yes, you can't bring it in there prior because it's still until after closing. So that's a good learning point, and maybe something that, as the agent helping these buyers get through the transaction, another voice to just remind them how this is going to work and what this is going to look like, and that you might just get a suite of builder's grade appliances that you're either going to be selling after the fact, or those are your new appliances. So something to keep in mind for them so that they are aware and they know what they're getting into there. All right, then this is obviously going to be Bob's favorite question of the entire day. Oh yes, Max.
Real quick, I just want to touch on two things before we get too far away from those two questions. The 1, 2, 10 warranties, we got a question. Do those transfer to a new buyer if they sell within the 1, 2, or 10 years?
Allison, you're shaking your head. No. So that for you guys, that would not transfer on. It's just for the original purchaser.
There are some builders that provide a transferable warranty, and typically that's limited, but the Minnesota standard does not grant a transfer.
Mary, do you guys offer that transfer, or do you maintain the same one as Allison?
We do not. We're the same as what Allison has shared.
Okay, perfect. Well, you guys are
Okay, one more thing is what if any, if you get an unusual request at the 11-month or within that first year, I would imagine they're talking about if something's not right, or you can clearly tell that that's not just a workmanship issue, but more so lack of care of the home. How do you deal with it?
Mary, do you want to start?
Sure. As far as we will help, our customer care team will help educate the customer as far as the proper care, so that issue does not come up again.
What about you, Allison?
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. We have a warranty coordinator on staff that meets with the homeowner and can discuss, possible solutions. Whether or not that's something that the builder has to cover is covered in a document that I saw this on the chat or the Q&A, Max. There is a standard for standards, and it's called the Standards and Corrections. There's a Minnesota standard. You can Google the form and look it up. 327A is the statute. You can check out what's covered and what's not. So if you have done something as a homeowner to neglect the care of something, that doesn't necessarily fall underneath what's covered.
And that was 327A. Could you just like spouting that like it's nothing? I love it. Any other questions on there, Max, before we move forward?
Nope, that was just it. Go ahead.
Alrighty. So as I was saying, like Bob, just earmuffs. I know it's gonna be your least favorite question that I ask all day, more than likely. So for Mary and Allison, what incentives do you guys provide for the buyer to use the builder's lender and title company? Mary, do you want to start?
Sure. For using our preferred lender and title company, we offer $3,500 towards closing costs for using both. That incentive does change on a monthly basis.
Okay. Is it usually something pretty similar to that?
It is something pretty similar, but it can change a little bit.
Okay, good to know. What about for you guys, Allison?
So Loomis Homes is unique to most builders in that we do not have an in-house or affiliated lender. We have a preferred lender, but they are entirely separate, and therefore the builder does not offer any incentives to working with them.
Gotcha. All right, Bob, here's your chance. Here's your opportunity now to talk to us about why it might be important to use a lender that's not affiliated with the builder.
Sure. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's not wise to use the builder's lender, but what I would say is that it's never unwise to shop around. So you don't necessarily know that you're getting the best deal just by using the builder's lender. The way refined lending works would be similar to the way that Loomis works with their preferred lender. So we've got preferred builders, we've got builder relationships that we use. Generally, there's a more cohesive relationship there, especially if it's a construction loan. So if it's a construction loan, that's where the builder, the reason the builder wants a preferred lender in a construction loan is mostly because they want to have the ease of the draw schedule, the ease of the funding, and just knowing that process, because every lender's process is a little bit different. I do always recommend to my clients to use the builder's preferred title company. I think that that's just a smart thing to do with lien waivers and everything at the end to make sure that it's smooth. Because in my experience, I've seen delays when we use a different title company because they're looking for lien waivers, and it's not always easy getting the title companies to communicate and get things done. So, but from a preferred lender standpoint, we try to offer parade specials, things to incentivize people to use us or to have a better experience with that. So,
that's a good point. Also, as far as the title part of it, which I know very minimally about, even though I've worked in that industry for a minute, I would say that the important thing to remember why title is so much more expensive or so much cheaper if you use the builder's title company, as well as simpler, is that when they do the initial like title and background and abstracting on the land itself, they can do it as one large swath for the entire development and then segment it down instead of having to run that search on each individual plot, which saves money and makes it cheaper, makes it easier. And as Bob was talking about, it does also simplify the lien process because they know exactly who to look for and what to look for. So much to my previous chagrin, that is kind of a smart play as far as ease of use for your buyers. Any questions that are popping through on that, Max?
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. I got a bunch. My thoughts are we go another 10 minutes, and at 9:30, I'm just going to roll through these questions, and we can just get them answered one by one versus trying, because some of them we're going to have to dive into for a second. So we can do it now if you guys prefer.
I'm kind of just going to be driving into questions for all of them as a whole. So maybe we'll just, maybe I'll get through a couple of these and then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some of those. All right. So to everybody, what do you see as the biggest struggle in the transaction, and how can the buyer's agent help to navigate through that? Bob, since you've gotten like the least amount of time, FaceTime on here, why don't you start?
Sure. The biggest struggle that I see is on the front end. So what does your buyer actually want? Do they want a custom built home? Do they want just a new construction home? Do they want, what are they looking for? And then what does that builder actually require? So do they want a construction loan up front? Are they willing to carry the financing? And then the hurdle that I see is the terminology. So For us, we offer a one-time close construction loan. And then what's difficult with that is that a lot of times I have agents that confuse a one-time close with an end loan. Oh, it's still one closing, but it's the terminology to make sure. And then your buyer can get confused really quickly. So, the pitfalls that I see from the agent side is that I want to make sure that I can educate and help you guys understand exactly what, some agents don't understand builder lingo, and that's where we want to help to educate and make sure that they understand, because the one-time close, a two-time close, or just an end loan, it's a whole different process for each one. So to me, it's about the front end side of setting the expectations and making sure that everybody's on the same page. So.
Perfect. So that's a big thing for the buyer's agent to be able to help you navigate through the expectations with the buyer. Absolutely. How about Mary? What about for you? What is the biggest struggle you see in the transaction, and how can the buyer's agent help?
I think encouraging the buyer as far as to enjoy the process of building. I find it so exciting. I still get very excited when the cement pump truck comes to do the foundation. I never get tired of that. That machinery, it is just absolutely amazing. And to enjoy the process, because I think sometimes that people lose sight of that as far as when they're going through their home and enjoying it and seeing the progress, they might see something that isn't quite done yet. I think a common question is the lights above the island. A customer will notice that, hey, Mary, the holes aren't in above the kitchen island. They don't put the holes for the electrical in above the kitchen island until the island is placed so they can center it. So the building is a process, and certain things are done at certain stages. So even if a customer mentions something when they come back, it might not be done, but it will be done at a certain stage of construction for efficiency. So basically, when building a home, you have to be patient and understand things are going to happen at a certain stage.
Sure, that makes sense. What about for you, Allison? What do you see to be the biggest struggle in the transaction, and how can the buyer's agent help?
I think that Bob and Mary both made really good points, and comments about setting up realistic expectations are huge. So I like to try to answer as many questions as possible before that buyer actually puts pen to paper and says, okay, I'm ready to build and do this. I think it's important as a realtor to make sure that you've read everything your buyer is going to sign, that they understand, every piece and part of what it is that they're signing up to do, especially when we talk about delays in construction and sitting down and saying, okay, we expect to have your new home ready in 6 to 8 months. That really means 6 to 8 months. And once we start to close in on a target date, doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to track at that. We have weather, we have scheduling issues, we have things that are being delivered to the home. And if that gets delayed because they got stuck on the truck that broke down, there's any number of things that can happen. So just as an agent, reminding your clients that this is a flexible process and that things can come up, and to be ready for them, it helps a lot.
Absolutely. And is a perfect transition into setting expectations. So Allison, we'll start with you. As the builder, what expectations are important to set if the buyer plans to visit the home throughout the process? So when both from the buyer's agent and for you guys, what are the important expectations to set if they plan on seeing throughout the process?
Yeah. So kind of like I said, the timeline is flexible, right? So you may expect to go there and see that the framing's done, and it might not be, or it may be further along than you expected. One of the biggest things that I like to remind people is that it's a work in progress. So when you go to visit the property, very likely there will be somebody there working, and their job is to work on your home. And if you're distracting them from doing their job, then eventually that might result in a delay as well. I think that it's important for buyers to see their home under construction. I think it's a really exciting process, and there's so many things that happen in different stages that it's fun to see that. And I encourage buyers to visit the site, not every day, right? But every week or two or a couple. It depends on, where it is in the process. But I think that it is important, and the most important thing to know is that safety is the number one priority. So if you are visiting a construction site, know that the people that are working there are trained to navigate that space. And if you are not, then you have to use extreme caution. And at a certain point, your realtor will need to accompany you to the property.
At what point is that when the realtor has to be there to accompany?
I think it's different for different builders. For us, when we get to the drywall stage, we lock everything up. So prior to that, the framing, we can't really keep people out. But once we get to that stage, then we need showings to be booked in advance.
Gotcha. Just as a quick one-off, Mary, is your process about the same for that?
It's similar. We request a 24-hour notice because we want to check to make sure the home is safe for entering. We also prefer the buyer come later in the day when the construction people are not in the home. They do need to wear a hard hat, and they need to be at least 18 years and older.
Gotcha.
To tour the home for safety.
Bring toddlers into the construction zone. Makes sense.
Right. It just is not, it does not work.
That tracks a little. So as far as then to you, what other expectations would you like to have set if the buyer intends on seeing the house throughout the building process?
As far as with Lennar, we really prefer, as far as they make that 24-hour appointment, that's just crucial, just to make sure that the house is, is safe. Even when it gets to drywall stage, we always want an appointment 24 hours ahead to check as far as the stage of construction. And then with COVID too, we prefer the buyer come and tour the home later on in the day when the contractors are not in the home.
Sure. And so they would just contact their primary contact, potentially you at Lennar,
Yes.
and that would be how they would schedule that time?
Yes. We would just schedule it for the next day, and then I would just check to make sure that it is safe as far as for entry, and then we can schedule that appointment, and they're more than welcome to visit the home.
Perfect. All right, Bob, for you, what expectations would you like set at the beginning to help prepare the buyer for this process as it differs from purchasing existing construction, which they might have done prior?
Sure. So again, it depends on what the builder's requirements are. So in a one-time close, from my end of the process, it's very similar to purchasing an existing home, except there isn't a home there. We finish the entire process before they dig a hole, which is awesome. And for you agents out there, we also, when you do a one-time close, your commission is actually paid out prior to the hole being dug. So it's a little bit different. So on a one-time close, I kind of treat it and try to explain that it's just like you're buying an existing home, and the urgency is there on getting documents to the lender in a timely fashion. On a two-time close, it's a little bit different. On the front end, it still feels like you're buying an existing home, but it's the fact that if you're doing a custom build, you've got a lot of decisions to make based on finishes and furniture and all appliances and tile. And then also you're gonna have to start working on that loan process about 30 to 45 days prior to completion of the home. So it's kind of setting that expectation of timeline and what to expect throughout the build, and just making sure that they understand that it's still a stressful process, just like buying an existing home. What do they say? Getting married and buying a house are two of the most stressful things we do. Well, if you're building a home and you're getting your financing in the middle, it can be very, very similar. So what we try to do is educate up front, and having the buyer's agents on the same page with us on again, the terminology is huge. A lot of times on the construction side, we run into bridge loans or home equity lines of credit because they don't want to sell their current property before they move into the new one. So it's just making sure that everybody's on the same page on the strategy and having that roadmap to getting them into their new home. So that's been my biggest hurdle with buyer's agents, is just making sure that they understand the coaching that I'm giving to the buyer to know what's going to happen and how it's going to look. But other than that, pretty standard.
Setting those clear expectations as far as the timeline, whereas
Right.
for Mary and Allison, yours is a little bit more on, yes, the timeline within it as far as like scheduling, but also safety and making sure that everybody, you know what to expect when you're going in, because it is so different.
Right.
All right. Max, I have just 2 more like questions to go around. Should we just go through those first and then rally through whatever comes in the Q&A?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a ton that we're probably going to get answered in the Q&A anyway going through it. So whatever you want to do.
Sure. All right. So to everybody, what is one thing you wish realtors knew before bringing a client to you? Allison, we'll start with you again.
So I work with other agents most of the time. Those agents representing a buyer, realtors representing a buyer. And I think the most important thing for you guys to know is you're a part of the process. And I welcome that. You are still working for your commission. You're still working for your buyer. And I want you to be present for everything as much as you possibly can.
It's huge. What about for you, Mary? What's one thing you wish realtors knew before bringing the client to you?
I agree with Allison as far as we like them to be part of the process, and we have different meetings throughout the process. We have our pre-construction meeting. We have what's called our dusty shoe walk. We have the celebration meeting. I think it's important for them to be part of all those meetings. And I think it's also helpful for the client to also have the realtor come with them once in a while to tour the home with them while it's under construction. I think the buyer really, really likes that.
Yeah, I think and it's, I mean, to be fair, they hired a realtor to represent them in this transaction. So freaking represent them. All right. Be there, be present. Good gracious. All right, Bob, what is one thing you wish realtors knew before bringing clients to you?
So that's a question that can be twofold. So if the client comes to me and they're already ready with a builder or have a builder in mind, the one thing I want to know is what the builder's expectations are for financing. That's where a lot of confusion can come in. Other than that, if it's up early on in the process, the biggest thing that we need to know is the equity position if they have a house to sell. So what do they have in equity? It would be a huge thing for us to know up front.
Well, one thing you had mentioned as well was you would love to have the realtor in with that initial financing discussion. Obviously not when they start talking about the personal information side of it, but when you're laying out the plan as to how it lines up with the builder. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, the initial, whether it be a pre-approval meeting or even after, if they decide after looking at existing properties to go new construction, I think it's always a good idea to have the realtor involved with that meeting where we're talking about strategy. A lot of times what I'm seeing right now is that people have the equity, their down payment for this new place is in the equity in their current place. And a lot of times we can build out a great strategy to make it so that they can hold both properties. But what gets confusing is that if the realtor isn't in on that conversation, there can be a lot that's lost in translation when the buyer goes back to their agent and says, well, here's what we're going to do. And the agent's like, I don't know what that looks like. So having the agent involved is always welcome on our side to just make sure that we're reinforcing what the true strategy is and how it works.
One of the things that I think is important as the realtors watching this, that all 3 of them said that they really want you to be a part of the process. And I think that it's easy to see new construction as something that they get there, they get it set up, you show up at closing. And I know that that's tempting, but at the same time, I think it's important for you to remember that you are part of this transaction. And most of the time they probably started with you as their very first contact when they were going into the home buying process. So you're still their person. Don't forget to be their person at all phases. And all 3 of them have said that you're not only able to participate, but you're welcomed and encouraged to do so. So earn your freaking commission already. Listen. All right. Lastly, what is the one phrase that you feel like you say 1,000,000 times throughout the transaction? Allison?
I don't know. I don't know if I have one phrase. I think we get a lot of common questions that get answered at the beginning, and a lot of it's about what's included or what's a part of that listed price. And there might be some more questions in the chat that we could answer, but to keep it short.
Fair, very fair. What about for you, Mary? What's like one phrase you feel like you say 1,000,000 times?
I am always reminding the buyers they need to make an appointment 24 hours ahead of time to see their home. And yes, they have to wear a hard hat. So I'm constantly reminding them of that as far as for safety. So that's pretty consistent.
That's funny. What about for you, Bob? What's that one phrase you feel like you say 1,000,000 times?
For me, it's on the one-time close. It's people don't understand that once we're done, once we close that one-time close, we're done. There's no pay stubs, there's no W-2s, there's no more appraisals. So for me, it's once we're done, we're done. I'm still here to help, but you don't have to provide anything else. So
huge. All right. Well, that's the end of my preset questions. Max, what do we have from the Q&A?
A lot. But here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to cover, and I'd like Allison and Mary to I'm just going to cover a number of questions in here as one kind of big all-encompassing question, because there's quite a few questions on commission. There's quite a few questions on buyers agents getting cut out. There's quite a few questions on builders lowering their commission or their commission payout. And there's quite a few questions on if the buyer shows up without an agent, is there some sort of price cut, or are they cutting people out, right? So if you guys can just explain how you work, I'll ask a little bit more specifically. If a buyer shows up or comes to your property and the realtor says drive by, what is best practice for you so that that buyer's agent protects their commission when they're coming in and does not get cut out of the deal or has to battle for it afterwards? Mary, do you want to start?
Sure. As far as we like realtor participation, and if a client comes in, one of our first questions is we review agency to see if the client has a realtor. If the client says, oh, I'm just driving by and I just wanted to see the model and I didn't bring my realtor with, they certainly can see the model, but then I get the realtor information and encourage them to make an appointment and come back with their realtor. So, and the price of the house is the same whether they use a realtor or not. So we love realtors, and we certainly like them to be part of the transaction.
Allison?
Yeah, so we operate a little bit differently in that we do not have or build models. So it's a lot more difficult for an interested buyer to see something if they don't have a realtor already representing them. The first two questions they will get from me are, do you have a buyer's agent? Are you planning on working with a buyer's agent? And if either of those answers are yes, then please have that person contact me so that we can set you up for success in how to follow through to the next steps. If those answers are no, then nothing else changes except now I'm assuming the role of that buyer agent as well as being the builder's agent.
So what I would say to that, and kind of to close out those questions, is make sure your buyers know that you're representing them before they go see anything, and make sure you have something signed, and then you're fine.
And Max, I would like to just give a nice tip. A lot of times what some realtors do, and I highly encourage other realtors to do that, is they will give the buyer a stack of their realtor cards. So if they're driving around and they see a model and they have the urge to go in and see it, they come in with the realtor's card. That is really, really nice. So I really encourage all realtors out there, give your client a stack of your cards and say, I would prefer that you let me know you want to see that house and I can set it up for you. Otherwise, if they really have to see it, it's very helpful if they just come in and hand me the realtor card. That's I think a really best practice.
It's a great tip. Plus, you guys
Yeah.
have a bunch of business cards, so just
Absolutely. For the sake of time, we got 19 minutes left. I'm going to roll through these questions a little bit rapid fire. I'll, some are for Bob, some are for Allison and Mary. I'll just call on you and you guys answer accordingly. I mean, obviously, if it takes more than a sentence, that's fine, but we'll go pretty quick here. A lot of discussion within their brokerage regarding construction delays since the onset of COVID. What may a buyer expect at present? Allison, you want to start?
Sure. Yep. So we make a point to let buyers know as soon as we have knowledge of any sort of delay. We provide updates as every major stage of construction is complete, but until we get within 60 days of the actual completion or closing date, it's all relative. So communication really is key, asking those questions.
Okay, cool. Mary?
We've been very fortunate as far as the process is longer because the demand has been great. So as far as the timeline, like Allison had previously said, is like 6 to 8 months. And if we give an estimate of a closing date and we feel we aren't going to make that, we would communicate that to the buyer and the agent.
Perfect. How are agent commissions figured? Base price or closing purchase price? Allison?
So Loomis Homes has a clause that they do not pay realtor commission on seller paid closing costs, as in if they are paying your buyer's closing costs. But beyond that, if your buyer adds upgrades and is that part of the final price, your commission is based on the final price less any seller concessions.
Mary?
The commission is on the base price minus closing costs.
Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, whoever asked it. I already dismissed it, so I can't see. All right, Bob, what items are required to close on an end conventional loan? Flooring, appliances, light fixtures, etc.
Actually, that's a pretty easy one. It's based on the contract. So whatever's in the plans and specs is going to be required to close that end financing, unless it's obviously winter and you need landscaping done. So I don't know if this is a good time to talk about that performance bond or if you wanted to wait on that.
Yeah, I think we'll get there in a second. I got it teed up with another question here.
Okay. So yeah, so the end loan, it's just going to be based on the plans and specs, and then our final inspection prior to, a couple days before closing. So as long as everything based on your plans and specs are there, we'll be closing the deal. Whether we need an escrow or not is dependent on the weather.
Awesome. All right, Mary, from a builder perspective, what can and should a buyer agent do to add value to the transaction? I think we talked about it a little bit, but if you can just give us a top point.
Sure. I think the top point is to participate, as far as being there from the beginning when we do the purchase agreement, helping the client throughout the process, and just reminding the client that it is a process and being involved in those different meetings, and then coming out once in a while with the client to tour their home. I think that really adds a lot of value for the buyer.
Allison?
Yeah, I'll take a little different stance on that, Max. When you're working with clients in an existing sale, you know that there are touch points where issues could come up. So getting through the builder's paperwork and having the same understanding in a new construction of where, we're getting to this stage or that stage, looking at appraisal, those kinds of things, like where in this transaction could there be an issue that would arise and how would you prepare your clients to handle that?
Awesome. All right, Bob, we're going to hit a couple here. How do the rates vary between construction loans and traditional loans?
Usually on a construction loan, you're typically 1% to 1.5% higher than market. Your buyer is going to be paying interest only during the construction phase. If it's a one-time close, They pay interest only at that higher rate, for the 6 to 8 months of build time, and then we float down to the market rate. They can lock in. Right now, due to COVID, the lock-ins are typically no more than 60 days. Without COVID, we were locking 90, 120 days out. So we're hoping to see that come back. So
Awesome. Kind of on the same lines, and this is where I kind of want to bring in the performance bond. At what point does it make sense for a buyer to utilize a construction loan versus a traditional loan? Close times, and then let's talk performance bond, just so everybody kind of understands where that comes into play.
Okay. So typically, if a builder will carry the financing, that's obviously going to be the best move for your buyer. It's going to be the cheapest, least expensive, hands down. So it's all going to depend on what your builder requires. So it's not necessarily a decision that the buyer gets to make. The construction loan is definitely more expensive. You got to think that it is a specialty product. So it's something that you're going to see, when we set the expectations, it is more expensive. Now, if you can do a one-time close, it's going to be similar closing costs to buying an existing home. But if you're doing a two-time close, basically think that they're going to spend another $6,000 to $9,000 more in closing costs doing a two-time close because it's two loans. And then, sorry, is this the performance bond?
Yeah, let's touch base on that. So just a little background. Different builders use different things, and understanding what a performance bond is and why the builder uses it is kind of the question here.
Sure. So basically, it's perfect time of year for this discussion. So I've got two new construction closings next week. Obviously, there's no sod, there's no driveway, there's no landscaping. So these two builders in particular, we're going to be utilizing an escrow account. As your lender, they're going to decide what they accept. For refined lending, we accept city escrow, and we don't require the builder to double escrow. Sometimes you're going to have lenders that don't accept the city escrow, so then you're putting your builder in a position where they're going to have to escrow twice. The performance bond is actually something that kind of streamlines that escrow process and makes things easier. It's basically the builder has an agreement with the city or the county, depending on how that particular city or county works, where basically they've committed or almost essentially bought an insurance policy to say that they are going to finish those pieces. And if they provide that document to the lender, most cases they will accept that performance bond in place of an escrow. If that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome. Allison, do you have anything to add, or?
I think that was really well said. It's important as a realtor to understand what the builder that your clients are looking at using is going to require or will not do at closing.
Perfect. Real quick answer for Mary and Allison. Build time from a client walks in, they choose the lot, say I want to build on that lot. Everything is signed from dig to them opening the front door to move in. Build time as of today.
Yeah, Max. So we have about 2 months where from purchase agreement to dig date, all of the paperwork and selections and things happen. And then approximately another 5 months from dig date to close.
Perfect. Mary?
We're very similar. We're out, if somebody purchases today, we would be out about 7 to 8 months, similar process.
Perfect. Okay.
I'm gonna say
Real quick.
Yeah.
If construction financing is required, we don't get started the same way if you're buying an existing home, we don't get started on the loan until we have a purchase agreement. So new construction is still a 30 to 45 day loan process before we could dig. So it sounds like we would be able to meet Loomis and Lennar's timelines from purchase agreement to dig date, but that's an important piece to note.
as far as
Perfect.
that expectations.
Mary, real quick, just because this is a common question for sure, people bringing it, and I can't remember if Loomis does it or not, but why won't Lennar install a ledger board for decks if the client is building the home, decided not to add a deck, decided to do it later, why won't they add a ledger board when they're siding the home?
Because unfortunately, not all customers will add a deck right away. So let's say Lennar adds a ledger board, all right, and the client doesn't add a deck, maybe they don't add it until like 25 years later. Well, that ledger board would have weathered and more than likely should be replaced. So they just don't feel that they want to add that ledger board, because a lot of times the customer, the buyer, will change as far as when they are going to add that deck.
Got it. So, Allison, do you add a ledger or do you not?
Not unless we are also installing the deck. I think it's important for people to remember that if you're not planning on installing the deck immediately, the choice to change the size of that later is going to be a lot more difficult if you have a ledger board already in place.
Totally. And I think that it's pretty common to see builders not putting them in immediately just because of, you know, if you don't put the deck in and you sit there, it weathers and you got to replace it. All right. Do you accept sale of another property contingencies? Mary, we'll start with you.
As far as different communities, depending on their volume and the demand, some will, some won't. For example, the community I'm working in right now, we have high demand. So in that community, we are not taking contingencies. But in the normal market, Lennar would take a contingency.
Allison?
I think that's a great way to answer that question. It can sometimes be a case-by-case basis. I think as a realtor working with buyers, if they have a home to sell, it's important to let them know that if they have a contingency in place, there's a possibility they could get bumped from that property.
Okay, cool. What are some best practices for realtors to build relationships? If you're new, you want to meet, is it setting up a time to come see at the model? Is it having a phone call? What do you see in your guys' best way to do that? Mary, you want to start?
Sure. I think a best practice is to reach out and just set up an appointment. And then I can do a quick 30-minute meeting and do a nice overview of the community. So that way, when the realtor comes back with their client, they are more informed as far as about the community and about the product, and they can better assist their client.
Okay, Allison?
Yeah, I would agree. I think if you have buyers looking at a specific builder, or you're just curious in general as a realtor, reaching out to a builder rep and just saying, hey, can we have a quick conversation? I have some questions, is super helpful.
I can add
Totally.
actually.
Yeah.
So as a lender, obviously we're looking for more builders to work with. One of the strategies that I use if you're trying to build new relationships is over the course of time, you're going to have clients that use specific builders, different builders that, you know, you may not have a relationship with, but use that transaction to make a future relationship. So it's very often that I sit down with a builder at closing and set up that coffee or that lunch to talk about, hey, how did this transaction go? How was it for you? And what future business can we try to create from this?
Absolutely. We'll just go 3 more, and then I think we probably will hit the timeline here. Yeah, we got 5 minutes, so we'll just do a quick 3. Are there options for people to upgrade or customize the house they want to buy? Allison?
Yes, we have set structural options that we consider standard, and then we have a bunch of different options for personalization design elements.
Perfect. Mary?
And we're the same.
Okay. Another one here. Do we have to use the builder's purchase agreement? Mary, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. The builder does have a purchase agreement. And yes, if you are going to purchase the builder's home, the builder's purchase agreement, you do have to use it. Yes.
Allison?
Yep, we use the standard MAR purchase agreement along with builder addendums. So as a realtor, reach out to that builder rep and find out what exactly they'd like for you to do.
Perfect. Yeah, this might be for all three of you guys. What if a buyer gets cold feet or loses a job during construction and needs to bail? Allison, you want to start?
Yep, the most important thing I remind buyers before they put that pen to paper and sign is your earnest money is non-refundable in the event that you cancel this purchase agreement. That is the risk that you take with new construction.
Okay, Mary?
And we are the same.
Okay. Bob, what about on your end?
So if it's a one-time closed construction loan and they lose their job, they own the house. So we don't requalify them at the end. They own the house. So there's really, and if there's a construction loan in place at all, they own the house. So if it's a two-time close and they lose their job, there's going to be some funding issues at the end. But at the same time, the builder's still going to get paid out. You as the agent, you're still going to get paid out. So from my perspective, I got a lot of work to do if they lose their job. If they get cold feet, they own the house. So there is no backing out. It's the end loan where the builder carries the financing. The builder also carries the risk from my side of things. So.
Perfect. Well, that is, I mean, there's a few more, but I think we've probably covered most of these. Bob, Christina's asking if you can put your contact in the chat. And that's all I have. I really appreciate you guys being here. Hopefully everybody took something away from it. Again, if you have any questions, obviously you can see their names up here. Allison, Loomis, Mary Dell from Lennar, and Bob from Refined. You can always reach out and ask questions from here.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to thank everybody again for coming and remind you that the recording of today will be on our website in the next 24 hours or so. And there is a short survey that will pop up automatically when you close out of Zoom today. And we would just really appreciate any feedback you could give us. So thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank
Pamela.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.